Champagne. In victory, one deserves it. In defeat, one needs it. Or so said Napoleon, which is why he and his troops are most often associated with the creation of sabrage, which is the art of opening a champagne bottle with a saber or sword. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, Napoleon and his armies were off conquering much of Europe, and as such they had plenty of reason to celebrate. And what better way to celebrate than with a glass of champagne? But rather than taking the time to slowly remove the cork, they wanted to get to that bubbly goodness within in due haste, so they would take their sabers and they would lop off the tops of the champagne bottles in glorious bravado, all while still sitting atop their horses. Nowadays, sabrage is more of a refined technique. Tonight, I'm going to show you how it's done. To start, you need a bottle of French champagne, and I specify French champagne specifically because French champagne is bottled using a much thicker glass that can actually withstand the pressure of this technique. If you use something like a Prosecco or a sparkling wine, you're liable to end up with a pool of bubbly all over the floor and shards of glass, which is never pleasant. Next, you need to chill the champagne to get the temperature down to about 5 to 7 degrees Celsius. You can do this by putting it in a fridge overnight or by placing it in an ice bath for about 20 minutes prior to savoring. When I do that, I prefer to invert the champagne bottle in the bucket to get the neck of the bottle as cool as possible. Once the bottle has been chilled, you need to prepare it by removing the foil from around the cork completely. This ensures that there are no obstructions when you go to savor the champagne, and also allows you to clearly see the bottle's seams. Each bottle has 2 seams, one on either side from where they meld the 2 halves of the bottle together. But there's also another seam just below the annulus, which is the lip of the bottle. And where the side seam meets the annulus is actually the weakest point on the bottle. It's about 50% weaker than anywhere else on the bottle. So when we go to savor, that's the point where we want to strike. But before we can do that, we actually need to remove the wire cage. Normally, I remove the cage completely because I think it looks a bit cleaner, a little classier, but some prefer simply to move it from the lower lip to the upper lip of the annulus. Then, we're ready to savor. So we're going to take our thumb and place it into the punt of the bottle, which is the underneath of the bottle, with our fingers underneath. This ensures that our fingertips are out of the way of any swinging blades. You want to find the seam, which you can do by looking closely, or just feeling across for a slight ridge, and hold the bottle pointed in a safe direction at a 30 to 45 degree angle. From the time you remove the cage, you always want to point it in a safe direction, not towards people or glass or that $1,000 chandelier, because the internal pressure of a champagne bottle holds about 90 psi, which is the equivalent of a nail gun. So if you think about it, you're actually wielding a pretty potent projectile. So we're going to take the champagne bottle, hold it at a 30 to 45 degree angle with that seam up, and we'll take our saber, place it on the seam of the bottle, and when we strike, we want to strike straight forward for where the seam meets the annulus. You don't want to swing out, because you want to get as much force as possible on that breaking point. And that's it. That is how you savor a bottle of champagne. But I'd be remiss to walk you through this entire process without actually performing a demonstration of sabrage for you here tonight. So that's what we're going to do. And of course, with any champagne savoring, there's going to be champagne in need of consumption. So, can I get a quick show of hands? How many of you would like to enjoy some champagne tonight? Good number of you. So we'll make sure that
Savor a couple.
So let's get started. We have this bottle that's been chilling, and you can see the foil's already removed. The next thing we need to do is remove the wire cage. And in this case, I'm going to move it up to the upper lip of the annulus because we are in a confined space, and it helps to ensure that the cork doesn't go flying off prematurely. So we'll loosen that, re-secure it around the upper lip. And then because we're in a confined space, I'm also going to attach a lead onto the cage to make sure that it doesn't go flying off too far. We're going to take our thumb, put it into the punt of the bottle with our fingers underneath, find the seam, which is right here, and then we'll take our saber and just need to attach the lead to the saber very quickly. Take our saber, place it on the seam of the bottle at a 45 degree angle to the bottle, and again, we want to strike straight forward for where that seam meets the annulus. So 1, 2. Now, if done correctly, there shouldn't be much chipping of the glass. It should be a clean break. And there shouldn't really be too much loss of champagne either. But the champagne and pressure that is expelled is enough to take with it any shards of glass. So when you pour that first glass of champagne, you always want to double check just to make sure there are no shards in it.
Yes, what up?
I'll take the second. Can I get the second glass?
You just by looking at it, clear and safe. No tricky hazards there. I should also point out that you don't necessarily need a saber to perform sabrage, because if you'll notice, I didn't actually use the blade of it, I used the back end. It's not the blade that does it, it's the force and the pressure that creates the break in the glass. So really you can use any blunt object. For example, a chef's knife, but you'd want to use the back of it because you don't want to dull your chef's blade. Or the handle of a heavy spoon, or for a more elegant affair, you could even use the base of a champagne flute, all of which I've done with success. Lastly, I should point out that I don't recommend doing this at home unless you've been properly trained, because I don't want to be responsible for any trips to the ER. But you know what? Enough with my speech. Let's enjoy some champagne, shall we? Can you guys raise your hands again real fast?
For everybody.
I'm gonna need
Make it
it.
People that don't want one raise it.
While you guys are waiting for champagne, please take a moment to fill out your evaluation for RSP.
I feel like it's biased.
It's like all
What's that?
the evaluation.
That's a great speech.